Hi, everyone. It's always a pleasure to have a trifecta episode. Returning for a third time is Amit Tishler. Amit, welcome. Thank you for joining. And returning a two-time guest, pretty soon we're going to have to get those SNL jackets, is Elliot Sperl. Many thanks to you both for visiting, for stopping by, and for being willing to talk to me for more than one occasion. It seems I've made a decent impression.
Dude, always a pleasure, and thank you for having us. Obviously for us, this is a lot of fun, and it's also a great chance to kind of tell your audience what we're working on. So
Hmm
thank you for the opportunity, and
Yeah,
let's get
thank
to
you.
it.
Of course, of course. Elliot, you're currently working in the world of Bob's Burgers. You also have the cat from Batman Returns behind you, always very exciting. Uh,
Yes, yes.
yes. And if you fall out a window, then you can gain the powers. I'm not exactly sure how that worked in that film,
Me
but
either.
it's,
I was always confused about that, but hey, the Penguins, coming back in popularity, right? Between this and the HBO
yeah,
show. So
yeah.
who knows? Maybe we'll end up in the sewer with a bunch of like robot penguins with rocket launchers on them. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
Who knows where the where
It
the night will take us.
It was a fun day at the writers' room, and I mean Michelle Pfeiffer was in it, the ultimate. So I don't ask too many questions if Michelle Pfeiffer's in it. And then we have Amit, who has recently been to Juice. There was
Indeed,
an award bestowed upon you, so please tell us about that.
two, two. Thank you.
A double
Yeah,
award.
yes, yeah. I went to Juice, which is the Jewish comics experience. It's essentially a little Jewish themed Comic Con in the Center for Jewish History in New York City. Uh,
Hmm
and this year I was nominated for four different awards, and I won two of them. One of them was the uh, Jewish tradition and folklore narrative, and the other one was Writer of the Year for both for Eden
Nice.
and writer of the year was it was both me and the Berkowitz brothers and Josh Gad for the writer, so me for Infrost, them for the writer. It
hmm
was a wonderful event, and again a great honor. So now I get to kind of say like, hey, Eden Frost is both critically acclaimed and award winning. There you go.
That's right. That's right. It's an awesome book. Absolutely. That was how we
Thank you.
first met, was talking about that book.
Yes, that's
Yep.
right. That's right. So
Back so many years ago. So many
I
years ago.
know. And are you gonna do like the flashback effects now, or?
Totally, totally. I'm also thinking I've got the like talk show host coffee mug. I just need to start getting those index cards that people randomly
Oh hell
have
yeah.
and start tossing them to the side like Dave
Yes.
Letterman style. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've also been traveling around the world. You have been to a variety of conventions. You've been to France
Yeah.
and all sorts of places talking the game of what you do. So anything about that that you'd like to share? A report from the field, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, we've had one hell of an autumn so far.
Mhm.
We both went to New York Comic Con together for the Last Wardens, which is our currently running series with Mad Cave Studios. We
Mhm.
also talked about last time we were on the show here, and we had a really successful signing. We basically almost sold out of the entire stock that they had for Last Wardens in the show, which was really, really cool. We get to do a lot of meetings related to that franchise because we're going to get a little deeper into it. But what started off as a comic series ended up very quickly becoming a small multimedia franchise.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
was both, it's something that we worked towards, but it was unexpected the fact that we managed to pull it off. So that's the big caveat here.
Yeah.
Uh,
Definitely a bit of a surprise.
yeah, and it reframed also some of my trips because I did go to France afterwards to MIPCOM, which is a big media buyer sellers event, which opened up other doors because the minute you have something going and it's starting to grow, um, people in media notice, and it opens up
Yeah.
other doors and other opportunities. So it's been kind of confusing, exciting, stressful, but creatively a lot of fun for us because we get to dip our toes into more and more mediums and fields and pipelines that we haven't before and take
Mhm.
on creative challenges that we haven't taken on before. So that is going to just become hopefully part of our overall strategy for everything that we do moving forward. We also had in New York Comic Con, Humanoids Publishing finally announced our first out of the 2 titles that we're doing with them, Postmortal, which is coming out next year. And there's going to be a lot more details and press coming, like in 2025 about that. Right now, a lot of our focus is on Last Wardens specifically because we are headed towards a big trifecta launch. Like the comic series is running right now. Like we're in issue 5 is coming out in 2 weeks. Weeks. And then the trade paperback is coming out in March 11th, 2025, of all 6 issues packed into like a first volume arc. And alongside it, that was the big kind of update that even prompted that. Alongside it, we're also having a tabletop RPG launching and
Very
a
nice.
full season of an audio drama with a big name cast that we're not allowed to talk about yet, but people will find out in February a little bit more details about that. But it's essentially like 6 episodes, 3 hours, I think, in total, or 2.5 hours of content split into 6 episodes that are going to drop probably weekly.
Cool.
So all of these things are production. They're all coming out at the same time. They're all going to help kind of promote and interact with each other. And they're all very standalone as part of our philosophy. But that's kind of, and right now we're also starting to work on a new book for like 2026 with paper cuts. So
nice.
That's packed.
Wow. Yeah,
so keep it
is
busy,
quite a
basically.
process. Yeah. No, it sounds like you're just a few steps away from the action figure deal, the wardrobe, the Happy Meal toys. Take us back to the very beginning, sort of the incubation stage. How did this project, for those that haven't heard the story, how did it come to be? Were you two sort of in a garage somewhere, and was there
Back porch actually is usually where we have our conversations.
Nice. Was there a portal that opened
We should
up?
get a garage though. That's a good idea. We should do the whole
Absolutely.
garage band thing. That's not.
And you know what? It doesn't have to be our garage. We'll just break into a garage and just like,
Anyone will do.
Anyone will do.
Yeah. Anyone.
Just get a card that says like comics creator, multimedia mogul, and when people ask questions, flash that.
Yes. Look, we live in LA. Break-ins are a regular thing. People will just go like, "Oh, this again." All right.
Yeah. You're
Those
friendly
comic
at least.
creators. Not again.
I think like, in terms of like Last Wardens itself, it started like every project that we started developing, right? We had a general idea that we wanted to work on, and through many iterations, eventually it became the Last Wardens, and we ended up, going to Mad Cave Studios, pitching it, and it spun off into the series that we now know as the Last Wardens, the comic series. The one thing that was different with this one in particular is from, let's say, Eden Frost, which was my first foray into this field and into this industry. Like, we've been 2D artists working in entertainment for a very long time. I've been a creative director in new media and worked in games. Like, we've been in all branches of entertainment for a while. Comics is something that we both started from, like many other 2D artists, but we've never done professionally until basically we took on this track. It was a few years ago. And Eden Frost was the first release that I've ever had, or, like even for both of us are doing Last Wardens right now, but at least I get to dip into everything with Eden Frost. And that was a really good just learning experience for me, because we were already working on Last Wardens and coordinating about everything at the time. And one of the things that we wanted to really pursue, because we are multimedia people, right? We're not, when we develop a story, a narrative, a property, we're not really thinking about it as this has to be a book, this has to be a comic book, this has to be a game, an animated show. It's a concept, it's a world, it's character driven, and as both fans and consumers of both mediums and professionals, we kind of try to imagine it as everything that it could be, no matter what medium you're in. Because in the end, it doesn't really matter where you're exposed to this story. our goal is as creators to get it to as many people as possible. And not everybody's a comic reader. Not everybody's a tabletop gamer. Not everybody listens to podcasts or audio dramas or anything like that. Not everybody's an animation fan. If you believe in what you do and you think that your creation would resonate, it's good to think about where else can I take it, especially if you're already passionate about those mediums and understand them enough to be able to know what you as a fan would want, which has to be the starting point every single time. So I think at that point, we knew that, like Eden Frost, the trade paperback came out this year. Like issue 1 came out in 2023, but eventually the book came out later this year. And Last Wardens came out, like 2-3 months after? So it was actually a pretty short window. And we were brainstorming a lot on, okay, we know that the series is coming. Now we understand the landscape a little bit more. We understand our agreement a little bit more. What can we do? Right? What can we look for? What opportunities for essentially like taking it elsewhere? And that's what led to everything that followed. And it's I'll start with the audio drama and then I'll toss it to Elliot to talk about the tabletop RPG because both of them happened in slightly different ways. The audio drama was kind of organic. It was Mark Allen Miller from Encyclopocalypse Publications. He's also like a horror writer. He was Clive Barker's ghostwriter for many years. I met him when he was still working for Clive and writing like Hellraiser comics. He was also the producer of Nightbreed and a lot of Clive Barker's work in the last, decade or so. And he started his own business for audiobooks and podcasts and audio dramas based on horror properties. And that's what he's been doing for the last few years. It's just his own production company. And he gave us one of the pull quotes. We were looking for pull quotes early on to help Mad Cave Studios, shop Last Wardens to retailers. So we got pull quotes from like Victor Miller, creator of Friday the 13th, Jeffrey Reddick, who created Final Destination, Mark Miller, and Dan Erickson, who created, Severance. Yeah. So we got all these like people to really endorse this product, which was fantastic. Mark has been a friend of mine for a long time. So when we were just like talking, brainstorming and stuff like that, at some point he showed me, he was like, hey, let me show you what I'm working on. And he tossed a file at me on one of the audio dramas that they were developing. And it sounded fantastic. And I'm like, it just kind of hit me at that moment of like, we have a product release coming out. We're going to have something on the shelves, which already means there's marketing behind it. There's content behind it. There's an investment behind it. There's scripts that are fully developed behind it. Like this could be a really interesting opportunity to bring Last Wardens to a different medium if we think about it correctly. And because he already was a fan of the property, right? He already read the issues and liked it and endorsed it. I was just like, hey, would you guys be interested in doing this? And, long story short, he was. And that started a very different conversation. And led to us essentially signing a deal where they are producing and financing essentially like the whole endeavor. And we got to adapt the story of Danielle Pryor and the Last Wardens essentially comic series to a completely different medium and really revisit it and rethink about how we want to tell the story in a way that opens it up to new audiences. So you don't need to know anything going in, because that's always the baseline. You don't need to be a fan to enjoy this. But if you are a fan of, let's say, the comic book or any other adaptation and you convert, there is a lot of added value. Like you end up getting a very different kind of experience. And, I can go deeper into what we did, but I think for now, more importantly, like we'll just get through how the others happened. So the other adaptation happened once that started going and we started adapting the scripts. We sat down and went, all right, now we have another licensing deal. Like, holy shit, this is kind of amazing. It's starting to branch out. What else can we do? Because we also had a timeline. We knew that one of the most appealing things that we had was there's a product, or now 2 products, coming out to market at the same time, because we aligned like, hey, we have enough time so that season 1 of the audio drama can start literally when the trade paperback drops in stores in March 11th, right? That's an anchor. What other types of products can be completed within that timeline from where we were during that time, and that can also benefit from our relationship with Mad Cave Studios that are very flexible with allowing us to use their assets and, like do cross promotions and stuff like that. And that's where Elliot stepped in with a very good idea.
So once
That's what
again,
the
back
kids
on
call
the
synergy. It's what the kids call synergy. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I hope so.
Yes.
So once again, back on the back porch talking, trying to figure out what the next steps are going to be. And I've been a huge tabletop RPG fan for a long time. Our campaign for 5e has been going on for about 10 years now. I've devoured the new 2024 books. I'm a big fan. I've also played through Shadowrun. I know Amit has played Blades in the Dark, and I came to him like, why don't we try a tabletop RPG? Because whenever Amit and I develop something, it's never just the words on the page. We build an entire deck about the world, how everything works, the systems, the characters, everything. It's a giant doorstopper of a book before it's even like taken to be pitched. So that, along with the art assets that Mad Cave Studios has, like it's kind of a complete package and perfectly set up to be something like a tabletop RPG. And that doesn't even get into the fact that as a baseline, The Last Wardens is sort of like a supernatural horror mystery, which is perfect, right? So we proposed that, and we were eventually approached by Studio Far Horizons, who's been fantastic to work with, by the way. And they're the ones who proposed using, instead of like a 5e system, using the Year Zero engine, which kind of leans a bit more into the like grindhouse horror, careful what you wish for. If you take too many steps forward, you might get splattered against the wall, sort of, mechanical system. And they did a lot to refine it. I don't know, I get really into the rules of this stuff, like and what they're doing is just really, I can get into that later, but it's really fantastic. But on the lore front, this might be a bit more interesting because, opposed to following along with the characters and discovering the mystery with the comics or getting added context with the audio drama, this is different. This is for a completely new audience. So we wanted to offer something that, if you're not a fan of the comic or the audiobook, you can go in without knowing either of those two and still have a fun experience. So with this, we kind of give the mystery to the audience from the get-go. The complete lore, what's going on in this world, what are the mechanics behind it. So while people are following along in the comics that are slowly getting this information parceled out, the tabletop RPG is like, hey, here you go from the get-go, and then here's some fun mechanics so you can create your own story. And sorry, going back really quick to the mechanics, unlike 5e, which kind of happens in real time, they're kind of leaning into the whole grindhouse thing. So things kind of happen in scenes, which is super fun. So you kind of create like your own weird supernatural grindhouse like campaign, which is really fun. So there's a lot more than just that, I promise. But like, there's just a bunch of cute little things in that, and the rules that I just have fallen in love with, like piece by piece.
Yeah, and it was really, and that's a really good example of thinking about not what makes a good Last Wardens experience or licensed experience as a tabletop game. It's more about, first of all, what is a good tabletop gaming experience in general? And understanding is, unlike a medium, like a linear format, like an audio drama, animated show, or even a comic, where you're leading a reader or a viewer or a listener through your version of a story. Like Elliot was saying, tabletop gaming is more about the stories you build. Like, you're giving people a platform, a world to play in, and a rule set where they get to tell their own stories. It is far less compelling to say, here's essentially the story and you just get to walk through it. It's not a video game, right? Yeah. So when you think about that, it already changes everything. And now that we're going, okay, so what would make a fun Last Wardens experience within that medium? You get something very, very different. So all of a sudden, it feels less like an adaptation and more like its own product that is very much focused on the elements that build the world of the Last Wardens, that the comic series and the audio drama just so happen to be a small part of, right? So it's all tied together, which means your barrier to entry is zero. And it also means that in terms of writing, the craft that was required from us, because the mechanics, the gameplay, like everything is handled by Studio Far Horizons, right? They're essentially like in charge of the project. The requirements that we have is literally writing, and that's what they rely on from us, writing all of the lore of the world, right? The expanded lore that even the people that read through the comic don't know because it's a mystery, right? That's slowly unraveling. But it forced us to also take on a very different kind of writing challenge. Because some of the stuff we had written down, but not in this format. Some of the stuff we've talked about in new and optimized around, but never put down in writing. So all of a sudden it forces you to create a completely different kind of document and to work with the game designers, with Bart and John, on essentially how to make this an authentic Last Wardens experience that also adheres to a lot of the themes behind the series and the statements that we're trying to convey. Because, you know, much like with Eden Frost, identity was the core of it, right? That was the core statement. Everything was around. Identity is a construct. With Wardens, it was always, you know, failure, getting over failure, like how to chew it out, spit it out, and ask for seconds. And that actually shows up as in the core mechanics of how the game works, which is kind of incredible because it makes it very authentic to our original vision for what the Last Wardens is, or what is a Last Wardens product of any kind.
Yeah.
Now, when we went to the audio drama, again, we had to kind of rethink, okay, we're dealing with a different medium. We're not just gonna directly adapt the story of Danielle Pryor or even write like something that's completely odd, you know, not disconnected from everything. If we are taking the comic book story and format and adapting it, how do we make this A, something that utilizes the medium it's in, and B, an actual valid complementary experience as well? So if you did read the comic or play the tabletop RPG and you're converting, you're getting a lot of extra value from it, right?
Yeah.
And one of the choices that we made early on that really paid off, because it, once again, is self-flagellation, but it forces you to make good creative choices. Like it's working within limits that you set upon yourself. We decided, hey, because, you know, like we looked at Danielle Pryor's story, like through the Last Wardens comic series, and went, it's all kind of following her, and it's the things that are happening to her. We're always with that character. So we went like, okay, we still want to stay in Danielle Pryor's, with Danielle Pryor as the POV character. But then the extra layer on top of it was, we won't give ourselves the out, because it's a very visually messy story, right? Like it's very dependent on these crazy scenarios that are sometimes very hard to describe. So in a sense, in the book format, in both novelization and in audio dramas, you lean a lot on having the time to describe something in retrospect. And that's what most people do, especially with horror. You want to build mystery. I went into that room and this happened. And we decided, no, fuck that. That's too easy. So instead, we went, what if we're doing everything in present tense? We are with her at the moment. What she is currently seeing and processing is happening in the now, and she does not necessarily have the language or the knowledge to describe it to the audience, like, you know, in retrospect, like she's already educated about it. That right off the bat created a very different script, because it wasn't just adapting. We not rewrote, like we kept a lot of the original dialogue, but we added a lot to it, because now you're in her head. So you're constantly hearing her thoughts, how she processes every situation. And what that ended up doing is, A, forcing us to write a lot of new content that is very much exclusive to the audio drama, that helps us expand on her as a character, the world around it, describe certain things that are maybe seen in the comic, but are a lot more fleshed out when you're kind of experiencing them through her. But it also just right off the bat eliminated some stuff that we're doing in the comic. Because if you look at issue one starts with, like, chapter one in the comic, a scene that Danielle Pryor is not part of, right? The first 2 pages. So automatically, we can't use that. We have to think of a different introduction to the world that connects us to the exact same point of her waking up. That already forced us to develop new solutions that help, again, like foreshadow certain things or even hint of some of the supernatural elements and how they work. So whoever listens to the audio drama right in the beginning, moment number one, are experiencing a completely new entry point that connects to an entry point that they already know. And in later chapters, and this is a different example of like, so some stuff is completely new because it forced us to, find these solutions. In others, it was just different opportunities to expand on moments that you are familiar with. Like there are moments, like in the recent issue, in issue 4, she sits down in front of essentially what used to be the door to her house. She touches it. Bruce's little like veins are kind of crawling all over her hand, and we see her tear up. Now, if you're reading the comics, works as is. It's perfect. You're going like, well, yeah, she's emotional. She's still trying to get to him. It feels impossible. He's not letting her in. Like everything, and she just lost loved ones. Nothing about that moment makes you go, I need to know more. Like you get what she's feeling.
Yeah.
Except in the audio drama, when she goes through that experience, we've actually expanded that entire scene into something different. We get that she actually experiences something extra that contextualizes a lot of other things in her own emotional journey. So you're all of a sudden getting this additional value of like, wait, when she touched him, she actually saw something. She felt something extra, and that drove some of her decisions in a different way. You actually re-examine some of the character's choices and some of how you feel about her just by knowing that extra bit. So once again, if you're just experiencing as an audio drama listener, great, you're getting a fantastic experience. You're not even aware that this extra, like content doesn't exist in the comic. If you're in the comic, you're not aware that there's an extra layer. You're not feeling like anything is missing. You combine both, you jump from one to the other, all of a sudden you're getting this like new perspective. Yeah. So to us, this was a really good learning experience on really how to handle these form of adaptations and not think about them as adaptations as much as just different entry points to this world and to this story, and how to make them all standalone, and just trying to reach completely new audiences that are interested in a medium first and foremost, and then buy into the story itself. And if they just so happen to also be comic readers or tabletop gamers or, like audio drama listeners, then there is a chance that they will jump and, expand from there. But that was the philosophy that led everything.
So cool to hear about that. I'm always a process person, so it's interesting to hear the decisions you had to make in that, the way you were thinking about it. And I love that idea of getting the chance to flesh out the world. I'm thinking about growing up, the number of stories and characters that were released in one format and then quickly became other formats. I'm assuming that's probably part of your reader histories too.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're all, like we grew up in the 90s and the 80s, and you grew up on a lot of like we're fans of essentially all of geek culture. I mean, that's not, come on. Like but I think one of the most crushing experiences to me as a kid is like, let's say you're a big fan of Spider-Man. A Spider-Man game comes out and you're like, oh yes, Spider-Man, finally I'll get to also play as like, and if it sucks and it feels like a cash grab, you know it. And there's nothing worse. There is nothing. It feels like a betrayal, like directly targeted at you, right? As adults, we understand how the business works. We're like, okay, this is what actually happened. But it doesn't matter. As a fan, that freaking sucks.
Yeah.
We are at a point where we get to be very, even though we're working with licensees, they give us a lot of creative involvement and creative control over making sure that this is a good experience based on our thing, that it feels like part of the family, that it feels authentic. By God, we're going to use it. We're going to use this opportunity. And because this strategy was very good, we're trying to now look for ways of expanding it. So we are exploring other potential kinds of adaptations and avenues, all with the same idea in mind. And whether some of them are going to go or not, we don't know. But what we do know is that our approach to it does seem to resonate wherever we go, because when you're dealing with a publisher of any kind, whether it's a classic novel publisher or comic book publisher, like they want to know that you're not just coming in like, hey, here you go, here's another cash grab, do something with this and I'll sit around and give you a checkbox. If you come in
Hmm.
with vision that feels cohesive, that feels like there was a lot of thought and passion put into it, and that makes sense, and that they go, oh, you're actually thinking of how this medium works or how our consumers are going to enjoy this experience because it feels like it leverages the medium for what it is, everybody wins,
Absolutely.
including us. And we just get to tackle,
Absolutely.
like I said, a lot of new creative challenges we've never touched before.
Yeah, yeah. If I'm a listener and I want to engage with the audio drama, the RPG, or the book, where would I go to do that?
So, right now, the Last Wardens comic book series is still running. So you can find the issues in your local comic book shop, online on
Mhm.
Mad Cave Studios. There are a publisher like on their store, on Amazon. It's honestly like everywhere. So if you just search in Google Last Wardens comics, you'll find it. That's easy enough. If
Mhm.
you're looking for the trade paperback, it's coming out like of this entire like run. That's going to come out in March 11th. You can already pre-order it through Amazon and through Simon and Schuster. You can probably pre-order it through your local comic book shop. Soon, Mad Cave is also going to have it on their website available for pre-order. The tabletop RPG is, or they just released, and this is a good call to action. They released a free preview version that is
Oh,
currently
nice.
available on their website. They also bought the domain thelastwardensgame.com. So if you go to thelastwardensgame.com right now, there's a free preview version of
Mhm.
the game. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not, when I say free preview, I don't mean like, oh, it's a few pages. It's a 42 or 45 page mammoth that they have really designed well. It gives you a full scope and a lot of, if you're a fan of Last Wardens, like the comic series right now, you're gonna all of a sudden go. We just had this conversation with another podcaster that interviewed us that's a big fan of the series, and he was just
Mhm.
like, things started clicking. I've been waiting forever. So it actually exposes a lot of the world building already. Like it's worth your time, and right now it's free. The limited edition, like essentially the full product release, is gonna hit both physical stores and be online on their website on March 11th as well. The trade paperback will actually include QR codes that lead to that as well. Um, and the audio drama is on Encyclopocalypse Publications website right now. So again, if you search the Last Wardens audio drama, and I'll provide you links as well, so you can put them in the description.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
you can right now essentially click to be notified when there are updates. We do plan, like I know I talked to our producer today, and he was saying that probably by January, there's also going to be some kind of either trailer or teaser. There's going to be a sample released before the actual, episode one release in March 11th. But once
Mhm.
again, the full series is going to be released on March 11th, and it's going to be on Audible, it's going to be on Spotify, it's going to be on Amazon Music, it's going to be everywhere. And you
Nice.
can also get it through Encyclopocalypse's website. We're still exploring exactly how to distribute it, whether it's going to be one big feature length kind of thing of like 3 hours, or if we're going to do it weekly releases as an episodic format. So all of that is being worked out because we're in production. And essentially, we're still trying to figure out whether it's going to be released as one big feature length thing or as, episodic, like weekly releases. But you can expect to be notified both about our big cast announcements and about our kind of distribution plans at around February. And we have a pretty star-studded cast. It's
Mhm.
not something we expected. It ended up happening, and we're very, very happy with it. But we have big names attached that have a lot of, let's say, nerd cred in this Venn diagram of comics, tabletop gaming, and horror as a whole. So
Mhm.
look out for those announcements next year because it's pretty exciting, and we kind of got all of our partners to really band together to make that happen. Um, yeah, so that's for all of the Last Wardens needs.
Also,
Very
they're
cool.
killing it too from the audio clips that we've heard.
Oh my
So,
god,
so good.
yes, yes.
Amazing.
Well, I love that you're in this world of transmedia storytelling, as we call it in the academic world, and I love that you're also showing people that there's more to comics than superheroes. I love superheroes, but I also am a fan of genres, mystery, horror, and the way those things come together. And I'm looking forward to the Paper Cuts book as well. I
Oh,
Yeah,
imagine that's going to be a different thing because Paper Cuts is youth readership, if
wow.
I'm, yeah. So
yeah.
looking forward to seeing the way you expand into that and checking out your flexibility in the narrative as well.
Well, we can already tell you that beyond paper cuts, even our humanoids books are, and we are very proud of this. Like our books with humanoids, which the first is going to come out next year. It's called Postmortal. I
Mhm.
can give you the logline because they already released that. Essentially, it's about a soul reaper who decides to quit his job in the underworld to become a life coach and teach
Ah,
the living how to essentially live life to its fullest, and
love
he ends
that.
up teaming up with a disgruntled life insurance agent, Vicky Singh, on their first case, essentially to start their own kind of life coaching business. And that one is a really good example of the difference in style, tone, and structure that we took with the books that we did with humanoids as opposed to Mad Cave Studios.
Hmm.
Like Mad Cave Studios, we wrote very like kind of action fantasy darker stories, and with humanoids they ended up being very I don't know how to call it, like holistic or humanistic. They're more leaning on comedy. They are
Nice.
slower paced. It's not really action based, neither of them. Very different demographics. Like Postmortal is a dark comedy. If I had to put it in terms of like vibe or tone, it's very BoJack Horseman like,
Oh,
right?
cool, cool. Yeah.
And it's also a love letter to LA.
It
Like it
is.
has a lot of, I won't give away too much, but this first case that those two characters that Bleak and Vicky take on uh, is a very LA story. And it's tied to a lot of our opinions, experiences, and stories from the entertainment industry. But once again, very, very different tonally for something like The Last Wardens or Eden Frost. And Stomping Grounds, the second book that we're working with them on, that's going to come out in 2026 as well. Um, the only thing I can say is that it's when we started developing this, Elliot literally just wrote a few log lines, and the one that there was we didn't have, there was nothing to it except for just a log line, a bunch of I don't even remember what the rest were, but the one that
No,
he
neither
gave
do
us
I.
that I was right, like we will never remember what they were. The one that stuck that I was like, I don't care what this is, we're doing it. Like we're gonna find a way to do this. Was he called it Bob's Burgers meets Pacific Rim? I was like,
Ah.
all right, that's we're done. I have no idea what this thing is like, but we're gonna make it something. So that's gonna be like a very very like all family for Quadrant kind of young adult story that's fully like sci-fi comedy, and with paper cuts once again something completely different. It is middle
Mhm.
grade slash all ages, and it's a really really sweet story. I can't reveal anything about it except for it's called Solar Sisters, and it's a sci-fi comedy, and it's very over the top, it's very big, but like everything that we do, and that's just a through line, whether we do action, whether we do slower comedy stuff that's more dialogue or more action driven, everything has always a statement behind it that anchors everything,
Mhm.
and a really strong emotional core. It's We grew up on superheroes as well, right? Like that was our entry point. It's not the kinds of stories that we write.
Mhm.
We don't tie ourselves to genre. We don't tie ourselves to style. We don't tie ourselves to tone. And clearly, we don't tie ourselves to medium. We kind of want to do everything. And
Love
it's
that.
part of how we also get to show our range. But I'd like to think that in whatever we do, there is our signature in it.
Mhm.
Like you can feel that it's something that we've done. I'd like to believe that that is the case.
Hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have much more to talk about. It sounds like we should plan a follow up. not a trifecta. I don't know what a fourth would be. A quartet, something.
Quadruple.
Yeah, a quadrilogy.
And
But
that's when I
glad
get
to
my
talk with
jacket,
you.
right? My SNL jacket.
Well, that's five times. That's the
Oh,
five-time
Oh,
club.
okay. Got it.
Sorry,
Got it.
sorry.
I'll
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 check
get a
on that
hat
though.
for the third time.
That's right. That's right. A button with my face on it or something.
ah,
There you go.
t-shirts.
That's right. Well,
Iron Fist t-shirts.
that's right. I need t-shirts. I need to do my own transmedia merchandising,
There
but
you go.
yeah. But we can talk middle grades. I taught middle grades for 8 years. We
Awesome.
can talk humanoids. We can talk whatever happens to be next. Happy Meal toys in the world of Last Wardens. Those would be some interesting toys. But glad to have you back anytime. Always glad to talk about your creative
Thank you
journey.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Jason. Always a pleasure, and we will definitely be back because next year's going to be interesting, and we're going to have
Yeah.
a lot to talk about.
We may have a few chats somewhere in there.
Sounds great.
Perfect.
Awesome. Awesome. You're welcome here anytime.